Alright, welcome back guys. So I'm Alex from FotoSun, Malaysia. So this is the Brave 8 and also the Brave 7. Actually, I haven't done a full review on the Brave 8, but I think most of you guys are more interested in the comparison between the B8 and also the B7. So let's get into the comparison. Alright, let's start off with the comparison between the video quality on the Brave 8 and also the Brave 7. So I'll be shooting mostly in 2.7K and also 4K. Of course, the Brave 8 have more frame rate options, whereas the B7 can only do up to 30 frames per second in 2.7K and also 4K. So from the start, you can see that the Brave 8 have better resolution and also better frame rate option. But does it really have better image quality? So in terms of color rendition, I think the Brave 8 have a slightly green tint, while the Brave 7 have some magenta tint, in which I will actually think that the Brave 8 slight green tint is better looking overall than the Brave 7, especially if you see those area with dark t-shirts. You can see that the magenta tint is very obvious. So let's talk about the Brave 8 and also the Brave 7 resolution sharpness. So on paper, you can see that the Brave 8 have 48 megapixel and slightly larger image sensor at 1.5 inch versus the Brave 7, which is a smaller sensor. But somehow if you look onto the video, you can see that the Brave 7 actually have slightly edge in terms of sharpness and details. So before we go further into the comparison video, let's just focus on the spec of both camera and also the external build. Alright, let's go through the physical of the Brave 7 and the Brave 8. So looks almost identical. The Brave 8 is just a tad smaller in size. Alright, moving on to the internal of the Brave 7 and the Brave 8. So the operation manual are very much different. Alright, so this is the Brave 7. So there are plenty of adjustment on the Brave 8 as compared to the 7, but somehow I don't think that all might be so useful. Okay, this is the resolution setting, and so you can see a major difference in the LCD. This one you can see there's a slight black bar on the top and the bottom of the LCD, whereas the Brave 7 it covers the whole LCD, but somehow do take note that the Brave 7 image are being cropped in. Alright, okay, let's talk about the EIS on both camera. So the Brave 8 is the top of the line in the Akaso family, and it have two options in EIS. One is the standard normal, and then there's super smooth. On the super smooth setting, you can actually employ in all frame rate, but it have to be processed in the Akaso Go apps. So you can't do it on the PC, and it can't be directly sent out onto any editing software. So while both have the normal stabilization, I think the Brave 8 stabilization are a tad hair better when you compare it to the B7. So if both of you are using 30 frames per second, the B8 just edge slightly better. And if you can have the option of doing 60 frames per second, yes, please use 60 frames per second, because 60 frames per second, they have more image to actually bring the stabilization to a better, smoother video. So what do you think about the stabilization in the super smooth setting? Well, I think the super smooth are okay, but it's not until the level where you can expect it from the Hero 8. So I think usable but not great. Okay, now it's 4K 30 frame, and on the B8 I am on the super smooth setting. So let's try run again. This is the view of the 4K 30 frame, and now I'm one arm away from the camera. So now I'm going to change to the distortion control mode. Okay, now we are in 4K 30 frame, and now I'm one arm away, and this is with distortion control being turned on. How about slow motion? So the slow motion performance in the Brave 8 are so much better than the Brave 7. This one have up to 200 frames per second, so you can slow down the image quality to a much slower footage. But somehow, do keep in mind that in some of the mode like the 1080p and also 720p, the image quality are not so good. If you can, okay, just stick to 2.7K and it max out at 120 frames. Alright, what about the microphone? Well, there's nothing to compare. The Brave 8 is just miles ahead of the Brave 7. It have the stereo setup, and then it have the HM human mode setup, but I think the human mode setup is just crap. So just stick to the stereo setup, alright? So it sounds much more better than the Brave 7. Okay, so now I'm one arm away from the camera, and this is the sound test of the Akaso Brave 7 and also Brave 8. Okay, so now I'm one arm away from the camera, and this is the sound test of the Akaso Brave 7 and also Brave 8. Okay, now I'm recording in human mode recording sound. So next to me is the roadside, so you can hear some of the control cycle rumbling, and this is how it sounds like using the HM human mode sound effect. Wind is now blowing towards the camera, and this is how these two cameras will handle the wind noise. So you can hear it for yourself. So I'm not sure whether the wind will actually make very bad mic sounding. Wind is now blowing towards the camera, and this is how these two cameras will handle the wind noise. So you can hear it for yourself. So I'm not sure whether the wind will actually make very bad mic sounding. Alright, let's move on to the low light capability of the camera. So both camera are not doing very well in terms of low light, because yeah, action camera have small sensor and it does not do good low light. So between these two, which is the better one? Of course, the Brave 7 with slightly larger sensor do have a cleaner image quality. If you look into the Brave 7, you can see tons of noise on the image. And if you turn on both camera on to the auto low light mode, you can see that the Brave 7 is actually much more brighter than the B8. But somehow you can see that the Brave 7 employ the lower shutter speed, and therefore it can capture more light, therefore it's slightly brighter, but somehow you can see tons of motion blur on the video itself. Whereas the Brave 8 is not as bright, but somehow it still maintain a better shutter speed, therefore you won't see much of the motion blur on the B8. And besides that, you can see that there's more detail and sharpness on the B8 video during the night time. Alright, so before we conclude it, so which is a better buy? Well, I think the better buy here is the Brave 7. But if wider field of view is important to you, if the internal microphone is important to you, and if slightly much better build is very important to you, yes, Brave 8 is definitely better suit you. But do remember that this one costing 1199 and this one is only 629 in Malaysia. So you can actually get two of these for one piece of Brave 8. Well, that's all for this video. So I do hope that you can enjoy the video, pin out which is important to you, and if you are interested to actually buying these two camera, yeah, there's a link in the description below. And if you are from Malaysia, you can use the Lazada or the Shopee link. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, yeah, do please kindly subscribe to the channel. And see ya. Bye.